Okay, here's part two. Let me screw this thing in. I got an overhead camera holder, so I can do it like all the cool kids do. All right, so this is a 19-inch K7000. It has effectively never been worked on. It has one cap that was replaced at some point in time. I have no idea when. There's no tags or anything on here saying who did it. But all the other stuff is basically all original. So if you look in the vicinity here, I mean, we got some golden solder. So there's R101, there's R89. Look at that. That's an R9. Which one's R96? That's R96. 19-inch K7000s. They don't always have R96, but this one does. That's that one right there, that 1.8K. Here is R101. That's a 6.8K. And then there's R89, this ceramic resistor that is 3.9K. I am curious how these measure. So I'm going to use the alligator clips here, because R101 takes a while to count up, because probably the C57. So let us see what we got. So that's healthy. If it goes over 5K, it's okay. Let's see if I can get this R96. Probably not, because there is too much stuff in the way. Yep. So he's okay, 1.8. And I doubt there's anything wrong with R89. Uh-oh. We don't want to do that. This thing's like kind of right in front of me. All right. So what I do is I add solder to this gold stuff and I just remove it. So there's a lot of gold in this area. A lot of cleanup needs to be done. Here's the yoke header pins. They were never touched, which is a problem. And the signal header pins, never been touched. Like, the only solder work that has ever been done to this was replacing that C57 cap, which, let's talk about that. So that C57, originally, that's a 47 microfarad 160 volt cap, and it's probably 85 degrees. And you see all these resistors around it. That's a lot of heat that's going to be around it. So this cap takes a lot of abuse, pretty much. This is the B+ filter cap. All right, so this is a 19-inch monitor. It's got a 123 volt regulator. I don't know if we can see this through these wires in the corner, but that is a 3123 voltage regulator. More on that in a second. So the B+, just this is a free tip. This is R301 over here. These look kind of nasty too. I'll probably resolder those. So this is supposed to be 180 ohm right here. This is a 220. It's a smaller ceramic resistor, but it has another resistor underneath it soldered like in parallel to knock it down to 180. I'm guessing is the idea. Actually, let's try that out. We got the alligator clipped here. We may as well, right? Let's see what we got. Is he in the frame? Yeah. This is 200. I don't think that's a problem. All right. So there is another important resistor. It's this one right here, this stand-up ceramic resistor. This is R103. This is supposed to measure 2.7. So let's see what it is. It's kind of all over the place. May need to just be resoldered. So we'll try that again later. Normally I see those, they're about 3.4, 4 ohm. And I think the worst that will happen in that case is the B plus will be a little bit lower over here. These almost, in my experience, never measure 123. They're usually about 121. And the same thing with the 25-inch monitors. Those have a 130 volt regulator. They usually measure like 128, maybe 127. Okay, so let's do the parts ID, all right? Which simultaneously I will tell you what people goof up when they work on these. So usually what people do is they will get a cap kit, which is kind of out of frame over here. This is my caps. I stick them in a roll of tape so they don't roll over all over the place. They'll replace all the caps and they'll replace the flyback just because. No reason. It's worth noting that this one works, right? So let's go down the line. All right, it all works. It's okay enough picture. I see it had like the you could see the vertical refresh, almost like a hum bar effect. So that probably means that I'm curious what that's going to show up on the component tester. But you have a good picture. It's filling out. That means the flyback is good. You have high voltage. Okay, that goes in the tube, right? And it's powering everything else. So the flyback is good. Now, what can happen on these? All right, this is a white knob flyback. These are kind of taboo. The people that tell you that you need to replace these, incidentally, are the people that sell flybacks. Just take that into account, okay? But this one has like a little crack here. Cracks will form in the focus block area. And eventually what could happen is the screen brightness, you know, it won't adjust right, or you go to adjust the focus and it never focuses correctly. Okay? Those kinds of things can happen. But this one I tried cleaning up, and I don't know if they tried patching this at some point, so maybe they did do that. But what can happen is they can form cracks in the side. They can form like little pinholes, and it'll start shooting lightning out right at the heatsink, which is ground, by the way. This is ground. And for whatever reason, it doesn't damage it. I have no idea why that is. I mean, that's like 30,000 volts shooting out here, or 25,000 in the case of one of these, I think. You know, so I don't know, but that can happen. And in that case, definitely replace the flyback. All right. Now, horizontal output transistor, that's this thing on this L-shaped heatsink. I call it a HOT. Some people call it an HOT. I say HOT is too many syllables, so I call it a HOT. That's basically like, if the B plus voltage is like the cardiovascular system of a monitor, that's the heart. Okay, that's what's pumping it, right? Kind of. Hardest working transistor in a monitor is what they say. And people will replace those because they're under the impression that they, like, I don't know, wear out. The thing about the HOT is it will either work or it will be shorted, in which case that fuse will be blown. There's a few different things that can crap out on these that will blow that fuse, but I'm not actually going to be talking about how to fix one of these, all right? I think Mike's Amateur Arcade Monitor Repair has covered that subject ad nauseum. I don't need to do it, all right? So, basically, if that works, you just leave it alone. If it's bad and that fuse is blown and you test this and it turns out that it is bad, well, then you go ahead and replace it. All right. Now I'm going to circle back to this in a moment. All right. So put a pin in that. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the voltage regulator. Okay. So the way these work is the power comes in here. It goes there. That black wire goes through the fuse. All right. It's not really hot because you need an isolation transformer to power one of these. Once again, not going to elaborate on that too much, but then it goes through, here's the degauss circuit, but then it goes through this filter cap. And if you feed 120 volts AC through a filter cap, all right, there's the bridge rectifier. It gets turned into DC voltage, and then it goes through this filter cap. Then it becomes about 160 volts, all right? And then it goes through R103, and then goes over here to the voltage regulator. The voltage regulator is responsible for turning that 160 volts down. There is no B plus adjustment on this. It's a fixed voltage regulator. A lot of people are under the impression that this pot right here, this potentiometer, is a B plus adjustment. No, that's a shutdown. As a matter of fact, if you look real close, if I can get in here, it actually says shut down, okay? That is not a B plus adjustment, all right? There are different varieties of voltage regulator. So this one's a 3123. There's another kind for the 19-inch monitors. It's called a 30123, and it'll be like a skinny voltage regulator that's taller. It goes up and down like that. They are not interchangeable. If you have a 3123, you must use a 3123. You cannot use a 30123. Otherwise, you gotta like change jumpers. There's like some little paperclip jumper looking things down there. I've never done that. I always just put the part that it calls for. But there's another element to the voltage regulator and the HOT. Behind them is a clear plastic insulator. You need that insulator behind them. If you replace these and you don't put the insulator in, you will be shorting it, dead shorting it to ground. Okay, that's what that heatsink is. And you might get some sparks, fireworks, and that fuse will blow. Okay? Another thing that people screw up, okay, so you can see the white thermal paste, right? You see the thermal paste. I don't know if it's computer guys that do this, but they got Arctic Silver laying around, I guess, and they use Arctic Silver as thermal paste on these. And once again, you'll get sparks and fireworks, and the fuse will blow, and that hot that you put in, it's dead. Okay? Arctic silver is conductive, so don't use Arctic silver. What you really want, which I don't have, I don't know where it is at work. It was in like a parts container or something, but it's like a little tube. It's maroon and white. It's probably says thermal grease on it. You know, you just put like a little dab of thermal grease in the middle, and you spread this around, and that's it. You want to use the white stuff. You don't want to use the silver stuff. Now, there exists another option. It's called a mica insulator, and that's one of those rubbery, gummy ones. They're usually gray or light blue. Those, you don't need thermal paste. So that makes things a lot easier, right? So you just get your rubbing alcohol and paper towel, and you wipe all the old grease off of the heatsink, or you could just leave it. I personally clean it. And you just use a mica insulator. All right? But we don't have to do that with this one because this one works, right? Okay, so probably one of the last items that people screw up. And it's not really a screw up, but a lot of people are replacing filter caps lately. And I'm going to desolder this one and just throw it on the component tester just to see how it comes out. But like I said, this monitor works. I've seen bad filter caps on these. And what will happen is, like, assume my hands, that's the full picture, full deflection. Bad filter cap will be like real scrunched, squished, and it'll be dark, and it'll be ugly and awful. And we had one of those out of a Revolution X a couple of years ago, or actually it's 3 years ago almost. And that's what we saw in the game. We took the chassis out, we put it on the test tube, and we were able to measure it with the meter. We measured the B plus at this blue wire here on the 200 volt DC range. And it was reading like 78 volts DC. And that's a 25-inch monitor. Should be about 130 volts, right? So that's like almost half what it's supposed to be. But just for giggles, I decided to flip the meter over to AC mode, and sure enough, there was like 50 volts AC ripple getting in there. So we had to replace the filter cap. Now, this component tester, right? You throw a filter cap on there. What is this? I think it's 560 microfarads. You'll throw it on the component tester, and it'll probably come out like 520, 525, or something like that. That doesn't mean that it's bad. Filter caps, just in general, they read lower. Believe it or not. And like all that's supposed to do is like filter out AC voltage, right? It's supposed to filter that out. Or if you look at the waveform, if you didn't have a filter cap because of the bridge rectifier, you know, AC waveform would be like that, right? But what the bridge rectifier does is it gets rid of the bottom, so it'll be like blank, bloop, blank, bloop, blank. Okay? The filter cap fills in all those blank spots. So that's how you turn 120 volts into 160 volts with the filter cap. It's actually really intriguing stuff. All right? Now, looking around, I can see this cap here is domed. So, and once again, these are the original caps in here. And this is from 1988. So, this one's going to be a lot of fun to work on. Also, pro tip. You see these pots on the bottom here? Never handle the board this way on a hard wood surface like this. Always angle those up. Because one time I broke a couple of them and that wasn't cool. Also, another thing that I do is I remove the flyback. I removed the flyback because I had one many, many years ago where I broke, I called this the anode stem. I actually busted that open because you're flipping the thing over and boom. So I take the flyback out, and by extension, you get rid of the neck board as well. And this just becomes significantly easier to handle. Because it's lighter, it's more aerodynamic, I guess. So, that's it for this part. Now we get to get into the fun part. I gotta clean this mess up. So I clean up all the gold solder first in this case, and then I do the caps. Altogether, it might take me about an hour and a half to do this. So the last thing that people goof up is they try to make it into a speed run. It's not a speed run. My advice, okay, I've worked on hundreds of these. I've worked on hundreds of monitors in general. My advice is to take your time and do it right the first time. Because if you do that, namely if you wind up doing it the way how I do it, you will apply a lot of time doing it once, and then it will just kind of work, barring the flyback doesn't erupt into a ball of fire at some point, which can happen with the new flybacks, just FYI. And I'm going to get rid of this neck board cover. Because that just makes these into like heat traps. Also, if you noticed, it's actually missing the thingy that holds this in place. I'm probably going to have to like zip tie, because you can see the holes right there. I'll probably run a zip tie to hold that in place. So, okay. So allow me to retool here and get to the fun part. Let's heat up these irons.